Guys, welcome today to our System 333 on-air podcast new series. How has the coronavirus changed the human experience? And today we have Dom. I'm pretty sure we spoke at the end of March and we had a
It was
lot to talk
right at
about.
the end of March. Yeah,
That's
very end of
that's
March.
that's 4 months. That's a
hmm
third of a year. It doesn't feel like that long, but somehow
Not
time
really.
has managed to behave in its strange way in this pandemic and in this
Sure
lockdown.
has.
So today we're going to be delving into the topic about what has life become now and where are we at as a society. A lot of things we spoke about, some came true in a pretty bizarre fashion. So let's get to the nitty gritty of things. First and foremostly, how's everything been for you? And what have you been doing over the last 4 months?
Um, yeah, so life was like pretty strange for a little bit. I think when we spoke, I think things were sort of just shutting down, so I kind of didn't really have an idea of where things were going to go. Gyms had just closed, so I work in a gym, so obviously wasn't able to work from a gym. So there was a period where I didn't really know what was happening there. Had to sort of start managing clients online. Um, and then for a while, I was doing park sessions with our clients from the gym as well. So at least that was good. Once I could do that, I could get outdoors, and it was good to actually have some face-to-face interaction because I was going a bit crazy the first month or so of the lockdown. And I guess then thrown in the mix, not knowing how long it was going to go for. I think at the time we were thinking it could be possibly 6 months, as the Prime Minister did say at the time. So thankfully it wasn't that long. But yeah, it still lasted, was it 3 months overall, I think it was. And then, yeah, gyms open then a few weeks after that. So I've been back at work now for, I think it's like 5, 6 weeks now. So it's really good to be back. Good to be back to some sort of level of normal, but I guess, we'll have to see how long that's going to last for now.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of, waiting to see how, the virus pans out. What that means is a direct impact on their life and, of course, on Australia as a whole. Now, you spent an extensive amount of time at home because, you weren't working. What did you find was the, I guess, day-to-day routine in your life? Like, in that time that you were not working, how long was it? 10 weeks, or how long were you at home?
Like not including the park sessions, like just out of the gym completely.
Yeah.
Well, I think the gym shut down 23rd of March, and we went back into work on like the 15th or 16th of June. So that was
About
like
3 months.
3 months, yeah.
Yeah, so
So
in
yeah,
those 3 months at home, what did you feel was the best benefit you got from being in that isolation before returning to work? It's something
yeah.
you
Well,
and
I
I
mean,
can relate to.
like on the positive side of things, I guess I had a lot of time to reflect on things, a lot of time to plan. Um, I'm someone who tends to get a lot of energy from having time to myself. So I feel like I really, really had like a good period of being able to like refresh and reset. Got my head in a much better place compared with before the pandemic. I was able to sort of utilize a lot of my creative skills. Something I like doing is I like drawing, I like writing and stuff like that. So I was able to do a lot more of that stuff. I was able to do a lot more creative thinking, and then I felt like I was just in a different headspace and a different person when I went back to work once we opened. Did a lot more, I suppose, walking outdoors. Like the only thing you could really do for exercise was walking and just training at home. So yeah, got a lot of sunlight, a lot of walking, listened to a lot of podcasts, a lot of interviews. So I also did a lot of learning in that time. I feel like that few months is probably the most information I've probably ever taken into my brain in that 3-month period ever
Yeah,
in my
definitely. Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah.
And we were speaking quite regularly during that time. So we were sort of speaking about different ideas. And, I think a period like that's great for coming up with ideas, gives you that time
And
away from
regenerating
everything else.
yourself.
Exactly. So you sort of look at things with a fresh perspective. You got more time to learn and take other things in, and then time to reflect and process and learn yourself and put new ideas to the test.
Yeah, I think you were kind of lucky to be able to have some direct time off. I think for me, it was a very different situation. I've worked through the whole thing, whether it was at home, whether it was returning to the office. I think that the main difference was that although I was working from home, I wasn't doing day-to-day activities. Like I wasn't getting up, I wasn't getting a train to work, I wasn't getting the bus, and I wasn't going to get my coffee from the 7-Eleven. Those type of routinal activities, speaking to people at work, all that type of stuff. So there was a whole blank period in those 10 weeks of lockdown where none of that was happening. But yet I was still busy and still occupied. So my mind was not, at rest because I was still technically working. And I think the one main thing that really came out of it for me was, I was able to do more of these podcasts, which was good. But the other thing was I was able to sit back more and introspect a bit more about myself and, kind of look at, well, what has it been in my life that has gotten me to where I am now in this situation that has affected the whole world? What type of choices have I made? And what should I be expecting now that kind of, my pursuit to want to travel more and all that has, been put on hold. So I think that's kind of what I was thinking a lot more during when I was working from home. But most of the time I was really occupied. So I wish I could have done a lot more creative things like writing and all that. But at least, the podcast kept coming through, which is good. It's always good to jump on and talk. So I guess my mindset since we last spoke has changed a bit since the start of the pandemic to now. Would you say yours has as well?
Yes, like I would say it has changed. Like yes and no. Like a lot of the things we discussed at the start, I suppose we labeled them as theories and like potential outcomes. And look, I've looked back at our first podcast that we did a couple of times now, and like a lot of the things over the course of that period ended up coming to pass. So they ended up actually evolving, a lot of them, in the way that we said that they probably would. And I suppose the stuff that we probably thought about that might be further down the line or might be considered, like potentially like conspiracy theory stuff, stuff like that's starting to look like it might not be that far-fetched now. I think the longer this drags out, the more people are starting to question what's going on. The more question marks are rising up over different aspects of it all. So look, I'd probably say I went from feeling like I didn't want to have like a firm opinion on some of the things back then. It was
now
more
being
like,
more solidified.
Now I feel like a lot of those things are more like, I think this is what's going on, and I probably am more likely to back that idea now than I was a few months ago.
Yeah, more confidence in your understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, definitely.
So with that being said, do you think it's become better or worse than expected from when we spoke 3-4 months ago?
A few weeks ago, it would have looked like it was better, but I suppose as we can see now, not only around the world, but now in Australia, it's affecting everyone again with this second wave. There's a lot of hype and a lot of fear in the media now about this second wave, which almost seems worse than the first time around. Obviously, because we all sort of know what we went through the first time. And like we did say in the first podcast, if this came to pass again in the future, if like another wave came, we knew that centralization of power would just lock things down again straight away. So I think this is what's happened now in like Melbourne and borders being shut around Australia. So we know that it is a much faster process now. And I think everyone's on edge that this could happen again here in Sydney. I know like at work, we're like, really hoping like our gym doesn't get shut down. different pubs and gyms and stuff in New South Wales have been closed already because of, you know, 1 or 2 cases coming out of them. So I think everyone's a bit more on edge. And to be honest, I think this is going to be a feeling of unease that will carry on for some time, unfortunately. So look, in a sense, yes, I think it has become worse, despite the fact that we appeared to have gotten over it, opened up again, gone back to normal. But, you know, that whole time that we were in a sense of normality, I never really felt like content. I never felt like, okay, this is all good again. Like I was a little bit on edge, like when's something going to happen? I suppose because of the things we discussed in the first podcast, I was sort of leaning towards thinking that some of those theories would eventually come to become reality. So I think that's where we're sort of at now. A lot more question marks about what's actually going on in the world.
And I think those question marks come from the fact that human life has been directly affected regardless of what position you're in socially, financially, where you are in the world. If we take a look at what directly happened in Victoria in Australia, the locking down of suburbs, the locking down of people in large complexes, the rapid contamination spread of the virus in Victoria, and then of course the compulsory wearing of masks. There is a lot to be said that Australian life has changed. Australian life has changed considerably. Even if it's only happening in Victoria, it's the fact that this is happening in Australia as a part of our history. And simultaneously, the crashing of the economy being the worst since it's been in the Depression. We Australians have not been prepared for this for a long time. And what we will be seeing now, which is what I want to get into, is what will be some major lifestyle changes that Australians will have to make?
Well, I mean, the mask wearing one, I think, is probably one of the biggest and most topical at the moment. I think like in New South Wales as well, we're probably looking at that becoming mandatory at some point. I know they're talking about it being on like mandatory for public transport. And look, it's not going to surprise me if we start following the rest of the world and making it mandatory, just in the streets. And again, this is something that people are very divided on because, you have a conversation with one person and they'll be like all for it, and another person who will be the opposite. So again, like the last time we spoke, I can kind of see both sides of things. I mean, personally, I don't really want to wear a mask around everywhere, and I don't think many people would, but I suppose you've got the mentality of people thinking they're doing it because they're saving lives. Other people thinking, oh, what's the point? There's so much misinformation about it. It's a waste of time. So I think, look, mask wearing is probably the one that's going to impact us the most. And I think it's a bit of a strange one because like I've personally found a couple of like encounters with people wearing masks like a bit odd. Like you can't read their facial features when you're speaking to them. I know like at work, like we have to wear them with clients, which is fine. But like I do feel like I lose a bit of like my personality in that sense because you've got half your face covered, your mouth's muffled.
It shows you how important facial recognition is for
100%.
Human interaction. There is a study on this because part of what the chemical is known as oxytocin, which I have a good friend, which I think you know of, that studies this particular chemical in the brain, is responsible for human interaction. And part of what happens with facial recognition is oxytocin is released so that you are able to engage with the other person on an understanding, meaningful level, because it helps with empathy, and that's a very important part of human interaction. And even, for example, if we were to look at this on a bit more of a broader scale, you and I right now we're doing a Zoom call, but the fact that we're actually not facing each other face to face in real life actually detracts from part of the interaction. And that's something we've noted. Yeah, it dehumanizes it, and that's something that I've, working in sales, we've seen how salespeople now have to move from using a face-to-face platform to a video call platform. And, that has actually, shown that, the people who want to meet the salespeople would much prefer to meet face to face. And it's a lot easier to sell face to face. So I feel like, with a mask, it's almost partly removes that humanization, even though it is face to face. I think one of the questions that have never been asked before, and I'm going to ask now, is would you prefer to speak with somebody over a Zoom video call without a mask, or would you prefer to speak to someone face to face with a mask? I think that's a very big brain buster for people.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting one. Maybe we can get to that at the end, but I want to wind into this. This is an expected lifestyle change, and to even go a little bit deeper here, I thought about it like this: just everybody out there was wearing masks, and now, because the use of technology and online media is a lot more prevalent, the only real way people can see or know who they're interacting with is through a digitally online platform. If you're always wearing a mask in public, how are they going to know who you are on Instagram or who you are on, in whatever real life, right? The only way you can actually see someone fully would be through Instagram or through Facebook or through the photos they put up. Otherwise, everybody is walking around kind of like in this incognito state. And
it's an interesting point.
And their identities have been shifted to the online platform. This is also part of the dehumanization. And it might sound like a bizarre theory, don't get me wrong, but it's something that I sort of thought about and has been taken into account within reality.
That makes a lot of sense, like especially when you look at the way things are heading with technology. Like we're moving into a very, very digital age now. And we might have touched on this last time, but I think as these months have progressed, look, we've just seen the rollout of like so much more technology, so much more surveillance, censorship, control. Like it honestly feels like, in a sense, not to sound crazy, but it kind of feels like we are sort of being dehumanized, and like sort of, I suppose our online personas are meant to be more glorified than our real ones, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I don't like this anymore, because I've noticed it really does detract from human life and the value of human life. And I think what we've seen is, I remember 4 years ago, I said technology would crash. And I wouldn't mean crash as in like, all of a sudden technology wouldn't work. I'm saying crash as in technology will exhaust itself as part of the human experience. And that's because it moves too quick, it has too much tracking of too much information, and it doesn't allow it actually impairs the human being's ability to function naturally. Because for thousands and thousands of years of human evolution, some will say millions of years as well, millions of years, however long human evolution has gone on for, we have not lived in a society that has been so heavily dependent on technology until maybe the last 50 to 100 years, and really more recently the last 20 to 30 years. So with the internet. So this is what I'm getting at, Dom, that technology may have actually exhausted part of the human experience.
I believe so. I think it's not I suppose it's not strange to sort of suggest that we might be moving into a post-human existence as we know it. Like we're moving into an era where you've got, guys like Elon Musk that are trying to fuse the human brain with like computer chips and stuff like that with his company Neuralink. Like that's something that he said is going to happen in the next few years. I suppose, yes, you can see the advantages of that for the person, but then like what does it mean for humanity as well at the same time? Like we just said, we're moving into an era where like online reality is like glorified more than normal face-to-face reality. Are we sort of being conditioned to have less person-to-person interactions? Are we going to be like conditioned to not be able to read people's emotions face-to-face? I don't know. Is it sort of like preparing us for this like online reality post-human sort of era that we're potentially moving into. I think like
it's something to think about, but the reality is that it's kind of happening incognito or discreetly.
It is. It's sort of
Well,
behind the curtain.
and even if I mean, even if it's not planned or whether it's planned, I think it's inadvertently just happening. It's kind of inadvertently unfolding regardless, and that's something we have to accept. I believe it does have a direct impact on a lot of things. I think one of them is it's shown that humans are less willing to reproduce, get married, have kids. There's been a huge drop in birth rates across most of the Western countries. There's been a huge drop in marriage, high divorce rates. So I think when we look at the basic fundamental avenue of human survival, which is through reproduction, technology in itself, I believe, not the only influence, it's just one of those few influences that have had an impact on human ability to, have empathy, show affection, and be unified.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think we're now moving into an era where like technology and science are going to be the sort of pinnacles of governance and human existence. And I think that we're sort of moving away from eras of like, I suppose religion and, that sort of community sort of feeling amongst people. I think it has been sort of happening for a little while, but you can even see now that, policies are being driven by health specialists now, not politicians. Technocrats, the big tech companies have more control over censorship and surveillance than governments do now. So look, it's just whether it's something, I'm not sure if it's something that's just been happening inadvertently that it's just too late to sort of wind back now, or if it's something that has been rolled out intentionally. Either way, I think it's happening. Most people probably aren't privy to what's actually going on. But either way, that stuff is going on right now, and we're sort of caught up in the midst of it in a big way right now anyway.
Absolutely. And I think when we go back to the question of how we got here, which is what are some major lifestyle changes Australians will expect to make moving forward in the future. The one with them was the mask, which we've spoken about now. The other, I think, was the fact that we now have to think about how our lives will change in regard to career opportunities, life opportunities, career, social, relationship, all those type of things. Going to have an adverse effect. And
I think with the mask wearing as well, like social distancing is probably something that's going to be in effect with that for a long time as well. So again, keeping people more distant from each other.
Now, remember in one of our previous podcasts, I mentioned that I asked you, do you think life would be like a post-Soviet Russia or Soviet Russia? And what's funny is what we're seeing is very much what I thought. And it hasn't got to do with what the government are doing. I'm talking about the lifestyle. I'm talking about the fact that you are locked in your house, your living room or whatever, your apartment, and you can only leave the house to do your essentials, right? And you don't really speak to anyone. You stay away from people, and that's it. You just go about your business, and that's your day, right? That was very similar to what was going on in Soviet Russia and post-Soviet Russia for a while, and it took them years to come out of, right?
Yeah.
So now what we're doing is we're seeing somewhat this type of thing rolling out. I think this is a lifestyle change Australians aren't prepared for. We've slowly been able to habitually move towards it, but I think it's in some ways Australians, they've never known such a life before.
No.
But it's going to have an impact, and it's going to have an impact socially. We've already seen the, slow and closures and limiting of people in bars and restaurants, nightclubs, frequent places where people used to, congregate, hang out. Are people being moved away from each other socially more and more? I mean, it's obvious because of the word social distancing, but I'm not talking just on a control for disease way. I'm talking about even on a psychological way. by, you know, shutting down a lot of the hotspots and venues where people would socialize. And even institutions like uni and stuff where people are studying from home.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's whether inadvertently or intentionally, it's a psychological warfare against like people's psyches and subconscious minds, you know. Like, I think however you look at it, it is it is sort of like shutting down people's ability to have social interactions, to feel comfortable speaking to people outside, you know, particularly people they don't know, creates unease and fear amongst strangers. I think you're right, like that they have specifically targeted the things that people tend to relax with, you know, like sport, pubs, you know, social activities really that people would go to as a hobby or something that they do just to sort of kick back with their mates, you know. And I think that being taken away from a lot of people is what has caused a lot of I suppose the isolation mindset that a lot of people have had during the lockdown period. And look, there's a lot of statistics around suicide and stuff like that that have come up as questions during this time that you don't really hear about in the mainstream media, which begs a whole lot of other questions. Is like the lockdown and that to save a few lives worth all the other lives that were lost as a result?
Absolutely. And look, I've heard of a few suicides that have happened. No one I personally know, but I've
seen quite a few posts.
Yeah, friends of friends, a lot. I feel like and this is something that I mentioned with Ben. And by the way, I haven't as of the day we're recording it, I have to upload that podcast. That one will be coming out. But basically he said that the issue was that once you looked at how people's lives change, that they can't leave, that, you know, it's very easy to be stuck in a cycle of addiction, right? So basically, because all you're left with are kind of your pleasures. If you can't go out and work, if you can't kind of, you know, do anything that has ambition behind it because there's no ground, no opportunity for you to do that. What that does is it intensifies your whole present situation. And if you had issues such as addiction or all that, it only intensifies those type of behaviors that you didn't address because you were busy on your day-to-day life. And I think that's where a lot of this depression comes from, that it makes people realize their problems more intensely. It brings more of their problems to light. And if you keep people at home long enough, that's what happens. Yeah,
100%. And I suppose like other things you hear about are like, you know, domestic violence and stuff like that. I suppose, you know, couples who may not have been the best together, you know, forced to spend all this extra time together. They're not having this time to sort of kick back and unwind, maybe with their friends or even just at work, you know, seeing other people. So they're probably forced into this confined space in like tense environments, you know, and, you know, it's just a recipe for disaster in some cases.
It's not practical. It's just simply not practical for be able to make people like that. And we know that from human history, the living spaces of people living in, you know, confined areas, not being able to move around. And this is where I mentioned the post-Soviet Russia type of life that we're seeing, where we're not completely locked down, but we're trying to move around. But there's that unwillingness that's been planted in our psyche. And the thing is, who is there to put the green light on and say, we can all go back to normal? There's no green light. I mean, who are we expecting?
No light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, who's because it's like a yellow light. We're in a yellow light stage, right? Not a complete red light. Maybe, you know, Victoria's an example of a red light, but green light. Who is there to push the green light and say, all right, guys, let's all go back to normal? It's not going to happen.
It's a good question. Yeah.
It's not.
Who is in control of that? Who knows?
Exactly. Yeah. So that was the other thing that, I mean, Australians going to be living their life waiting for this green light to go about their business again. And once I accepted that the answer may be no, I won't say no completely, but I said once I accepted that the answer may be no, that's when I had to reevaluate and think about my own plans. I'm an avid traveler. I know you are too. I really wanted to go traveling at this point in time. It's the end of July, and I was willing to take annual leave, go away for about a month. Looking to travel Central Asia with a friend, and also do a few other things. But now I can't do that. And that was part of my big plans for this year. And that goes along ahead with a lot of other plans, more of the System 333 stuff, part of my writing and all that. A lot of that has had to be put on hold when it comes to the travel. Now, what that means is, what are Australians going to be doing now that they realize that they can't travel or can't do the same type of trips they used to, Dom? Yourself included, being one of those people that love to travel.
Well, initially I had thought, well, that's going to open up more possibility to travel within our own country, see more of Australia. And as it's progressed, it's looking like we can't even leave New South Wales at the moment. So,
well, think about it this way. I would have loved to have been in Queensland right now, but Fairfield and a few other suburbs got a suburb ban. I've never seen that in my life. That's pretty whack, if you ask me. And I mean, look, how do I know that, even if I go to Brisbane or Queensland or whatnot, that I'll be able to leave in the next week because some shit goes down. You know what I mean? There's an outbreak and some shit goes down. And that's the thing. You can't risk moving around. I was even invited to a retreat by a friend who I also had on the podcast, Pete. He invited me to a retreat the end of this month. It was still within the New South Wales border, but I just didn't want to risk it because how did I know that by then they wouldn't even allow you to leave their suburb or travel out of a certain district? There is a patrolling.
It becomes riskier now, so it puts fear in people wanting to travel. Like maybe they just won't bother now, out of fear of getting quarantined somewhere or getting shut down somewhere else, not being able to come back.
I feel like travel has become something where, it's simple. Unless it's essential travel, you can't travel. But I feel like that's happening more than a macro.
It's going to become a privilege, I think, in the future, rather than, I suppose what we took for granted before as just like a
open
every year
travel
kind of thing. Yeah, it's going to become a privilege and a luxury, and select people get to do it, I think, in the near future anyway.
And I think that's where a lot of my mindset changed, even the opportunities to run businesses. Now, this was the next part of what I wanted to say about how the lifestyle changes will happen. So we understand that there will be a bit more, we've discussed the fact that masks and technology simultaneously will somehow dehumanize human interactions day to day. We've discussed that there is a limitation on Australia's the opportunities Australians have to move around, whether it means traveling internationally, locally, state. That has happened as well. Then the other thing is work. So we understand about 1 million Australians have lost their jobs. The government looks to extend the JobKeeper and JobSeeker payments at a reduced rate to help maintain people's life. But the issue is a lot of businesses have shut. And I think Victorian businesses have copped it the hardest because they were given the initial wave, which a lot of them were affected, and then, they were slowly reopening, but now they had the second wave, and that has, just been another, kind of obstacle they've had to overcome.
Yeah.
Now, what this means is we've seen a major shutdown of a lot of industries where a lot of people had jobs, and a lot of people our age, late 20s, early 20s, early 30s, just all kind of stuck in limbo. This has an adverse effect on Australian life to come. And I remember I had a dream about this, and I saw that Australian life will return to more of what we would say is a kind of homegrown type of trade. So manufacturing, farming, building, what do you think is going to happen to the workforce in Australia?
Yeah, look, I think you're right in that sense. Like I suppose like it's hard to know because I mean, like the way things are going, like it looks like Australia's being pretty defiant with like their terms against China and stuff. So the way that's going, I feel like China may cut us off in trade avenues, which would then ultimately mean that we have to start becoming more Australian made, homegrown, which would open up more jobs here. However, if we're living in a society that's in constant fear of pandemic outbreaks, what's that going to mean for work? You know, if there's no work, if there's nothing being made, then there's nothing to go to stores. If there's no stores open, like with less stores open, you know, less money circulating, how are people going to be able to afford things? There's going to be shortages in all avenues. So something I've actually thought of, I thought of it actually a few months back, but now it's probably not such a strange concept. I actually reckon we're going to see in the future more, I suppose, artificial intelligence in workplaces, like more machinery, more robots doing human labor, because
to keep the social distancing.
They can keep production going during a pandemic crisis, can't they? You know, they're not going to catch a virus, so that could be a great excuse to roll out that, put more people out of work, to sort of keep production going, in that sense. So I think we might see more things like that happening. Like one of my mates showed me a video the other week of there's like these robot things in some Woolworths now that like check stock on shelves. Like it's like this tall like cylinder thing that like moves around itself. It checks stock and like reports back to the front like what needs to be replenished and stuff. Like I thought that was absolutely insane. Like I wouldn't have thought that anything like that would come into existence in this point in time. You know, that seems like sci-fi kind of things.
Yeah.
Like it actually looks like a robot. Like it's crazy. Like not
something
like
out of Star Wars.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like just like that, just symbolized like this train of thought that I've got, and I actually do feel like it's not going to be that far into the future where we'll see more sort of robots and machinery doing production roles that humans have been used to doing. You know, one day you might walk into Woolworths and you'll get served by a machine. You know, you already have self-service. They'll probably just continue to roll those out as people become more obsolete in these roles. So that's one thing I think that will change. And yeah, so I think, sorry, I'm just getting a call here.
That's right.
Decline. Yeah, so what were the other questions like around?
No. I think
like
you really covered it.
stuff?
You really covered it. You know, a lot of roles will be automated. I think we've had that discussion before. But also there'll be a lot less work for people. So it's going to be a really tough.
I think people are going to be fighting for work, more or less.
The market
we're
was going to be more skewed.
More homeless people, things like that.
Exactly. One thing I found interesting is I went to the protein shop the other day, actually yesterday, and I went before the pandemic, or just as the pandemic started, kind of when we did our first podcast, and it was the end of March, so it was exactly 4 months ago, and I bought all this protein, man, 3 tubs for a really cheap price, and a lot of servings, really good protein as well, good quality.
Yeah.
And I've had it. I've got 2 tubs that are unopened. I've finished one. My mate got me one for my birthday, so I've been having that one. So I'm not any short of protein. But once I went into that supplement store, I noticed most of the products that were once there were no longer there.
Yeah,
Nothing was on sale. Nothing was on sale.
Yeah.
Everything was at full scale price. And anything that was on sale, well, there wasn't much on sale to begin with, right? And I was like, wow, you know, now it's even getting hard for us to get all these products in that we used to, you know. So they're stocking less items on the shelf. And even the fact that there are less people working as well. Like if you have less items to be able to sell, you're going to be selling items for more expensive, and you're going to have less people working because you have to cover their wage. And people will be buying less as well because they don't have the money to spend for those expensive items. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. It's
And
a
that's what
downward
I've.
spiral in a way.
It's a downward spiral, yeah.
Yeah.
So you see the reduction of labor as a result of the price of buying items,
Hmm.
the rising of prices for items that maybe were once cheaper at their
Hmm.
top level price, and less people shopping. So,
Yeah.
and less people buying at that price. So it's really, really had no. This is the draining. I never felt it properly until yesterday, and I
Mm.
was so thankful, Dom, that I went and bought all that protein before the pandemic. It's like
Yeah.
literally like buying in the market before it crashes,
Yeah.
Um,
Pretty much the protein market.
or buying the market, yeah, but yeah, exactly. It's just the protein market. I think that's probably a good one now. so
Yeah.
so that's another lifestyle change. Now, have you noticed any changes maybe in your day-to-day life when it comes to the buying or selling of goods or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, like at the start, obviously, like remember we had all the shortages in the stores because everyone just panic bought things, so being like a bodybuilder, like I found it very frustrating not being able to buy rice for like weeks. I couldn't
Mm.
find rice, pasta, a lot of the things that I even like tuna and things like you never had to get a cap on like how many you purchased. You were only able to buy like one or two, cans of tuna in some stores. I buy multiple cans for like a week. Anyone who knows me knows I love my tuna. You could only buy like one packet of eggs at one point, I think. And yeah, it was just like, it was crazy. Like it was really, really frustrating not being able to buy the things that you used to being able to eat. And, in some shops I have seen already, some things have started to become, I guess, a bit less stocked on the shelves just because people are maybe stocking up on them already. Toilet paper already is one. I've noticed some stores have like less rice already. So I think people are sort of starting to hoard some of those long-term foods that you can sort of hold on to for a while, maybe fearing that this could happen again. Which is, it's annoying in itself because we learnt the last time that we were still able to go to the shop. So that didn't stop us from having access to food being in the lockdown. So I don't know why that would happen again anyway. But yeah, look, it's interesting what you said about the prices being full price in that shop, because I've seen some stores now that like have sales on most things. So it's almost like they can't get rid of things.
Yeah, and
so they've got to
but
drop
there's a
the
reason
prices.
they have a sale because their business is actually shutting down. So
yeah, well, that too. And then you're going to see more and more stores boarded up, more stores empty.
I've already
Like
seen so many. I
went to
wanted to do a.
Brighton.
You're gone.
Yeah, I went to Brighton a couple of weeks ago, right? So I used to live there a few years back. It was a very big hotspot for like restaurants, cafes, and stuff like that. And I was like so shocked, like going down Bay Street to see how many shops were up for lease, were completely empty. Whereas, a few months ago, they were all full when I went past there. And it was actually like a bit chilling. Like I saw how many in a small collection of space was just like empty and up for lease. And it's scary because I've seen that in a few different areas now. And it's kind of like a sign of what might be coming. It's scary because it kind of makes you think of those like post-apocalyptic type movies where you see like all, what like America looks like now in a lot of places with all the shops like burnt down and sort of empty. And yeah, it's sort of scary to think we could be heading towards that. And I think we are, like we're ultimately heading towards a recession anyway, but I think we haven't fully felt
We're in a recession already.
All the effects. Yeah. I mean, we haven't felt the full effect yet.
No, we haven't. That's why it's going to be very drawn out. And I've already seen the impact already in the city, going to work every day. One of the major hotels that I walked past every morning and got my coffee shut. A whole lot of shops, a whole lot of coffee shops that were open that you used to go to for lunch, shut.
Yeah.
So many places are closed, man. It's unbelievable. It's a shocker. And it's because a lot of these other corporate office buildings haven't had their employees return to work yet to the office. And yeah, there's just mainly no jobs. A lot of companies have to go into liquidation. Some are just better off not operating because they're already a loss. So they just cut their losses while they can, because nobody knew even when the pandemic started, when the pandemic was going to end. So that uncertainty of their business already was there. And now the pandemic was just, something that came along and, swept a lot of businesses away.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and this is the way I see it, was that it's in reality, what's happening now is that Australian life has been trampled by a majority of the fact that we had an unstable economy building up for years because of all the debt that was racked up, both individual debt from the government, all that type of stuff. And this is not just happening on a localized national scale. This is international as well.
In a lot of countries.
So, what do you think this is going to mean for money in the future? I think money's kind of it's become really illusionary now.
Yeah, I think everyone's. I suppose the value that people place on money now is going to be so different wherever you go. Like people who weren't tight spenders before are probably going to be the complete opposite now. Going to be very frugal and tight with their spending. Saving for a rainy day is probably going to become the norm now. Saving for a pandemic outbreak, really. Like, I think, I think like a lot of people are really going to be like monitoring now how they spend their money. But I think you take away things like travel and some of the luxuries we're used to, like, people going out on the weekends and things like that being taken away, you're naturally going to be able to hold on to more money. But I think it's definitely going to be something that saving money is going to become more of a thing now for most people. But then you take into consideration, some relationships, only one partner's making money, the other partner's not, so then you got to take that into consideration. Also taking into consideration that, people have maybe had pay cuts and they've got mortgages to pay for. They've got more things to spend money on, and they've got less money coming in now. So I guess when you take that into consideration, like, it probably evens out for a lot of people. Some people are now on like the job keeper and job seeker, which might be less than what they were making before. So they might not actually be able to save as much as they were before. But look, I think if you look at it, looking at it in a global scale, I think it asks a lot more questions, because, like, look at how many global economies are going to crash as a result of this. Like, so many countries, some of the biggest countries that we think of anyways, the biggest countries, they're heading for huge collapses. Like America, like I've been listening to a couple of podcasts this week about how badly they're going to feel the impact of this recession, and it sounds like they're going to be hit harder than they've ever been hit before.
Yeah, and it's going to also reset everything there.
They're going to have a complete collapse of everything there. And I think we're probably going to see a time where we see a reimagining of currency and values and exchanges and stuff like that. Like, it would not surprise me if we do go into like a period of, some solidification of like global markets, and we see more like global currencies. Years ago that was probably like conspiracy theory. Now I actually think that this is something that we're going to see. Like, we're not going to see all these different dollars and types of currencies around the world. I think we are going to see more unified global markets. And
well, the biggest thing is cryptocurrency has held itself up in this period of time.
Digital currencies, I think, going to become more prominent as well.
Yeah, I definitely think we're going to see an effect on how money is played out now, mainly because of the behavioral use of money and its approach, because this has been brought on also by a lot of debt, which has left Australians in the situation they're in.
It's exposed a lot of economies that were in quite severe debt, that were sort of just getting by, or just sort of getting by on borrowed money, particularly the US. Like trillions and trillions of dollars of debt that they're probably never going to get out of. And I think since the GFC, a lot of banks and stuff got bailed out at the time, and now that's being exposed as to how, what's the word I'm after? I suppose how weak the floor was that they were sort of standing on.
Yeah, I think when you have a lacking foundation and you're trying to, find out a band-aid solution for the problem, it's not going to work. It's just the wounds are just going to continually build up. You're never going to get to the bottom of the issue. And I think now that's what we're seeing. And we really hope that all Australians can return to a normal life. I think it is very, very much a shocking occurrence that has happened in our human experience. But what I guess the most important thing now is what is a solution? What can you do as a person, as an individual? Because we've discussed how life has changed. We've discussed what the possibilities of Australian life will look at. I feel, this is my opinion, so I feel like that Australians now, and I always said this after coming back from India, from Russia, even from Greece, because Greece went through a really bad economic crisis. They managed to really hold up the last couple of years and even do a good job with managing the coronavirus. But Greece felt a very similar hit in their economy, because of debt as well and whatnot. But one thing is, Greeks had a more laid back way of living. They weren't as crazy as Sydney-siders and Australians, on that hustle, making that money. But I'm feeling that Australians will now maybe have to not live life so much in the fast lane. That living in the fast lane isn't something you can really do anymore. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it became like that way for most people during the lockdown anyway. So I think a lot of people I've spoken to have said that they actually enjoyed that time. They enjoyed having a bit of a break from work or living a different lifestyle, working from home, having a bit more time to do things, getting out of that 9 to 5 routine, getting the transport into the city, coming home late at night, that kind of thing. So I think people probably don't want to go back to that hustle and bustle lifestyle. Naturally you'll have some people who, they thrive off that, but I think most people are going to find that they prefer a bit more of a laid back approach. But I mean, if having that means that they're not having an income, then I suppose they would probably prefer to work and have that for an income.
Well, that's kind of how like some of these Southern European countries are, life still goes on, but at a much slower pace. Life is not in the fast lane.
They find more alternative ways to make money that don't involve stress
or enjoy their time.
Exactly.
And one thing we used to say is for example, in Greece, and this isn't everyone, but this is, this happens quite often. If two people were to go and get a coffee and drink a coffee, in Australia, what I noticed in Sydney especially, people would finish their coffee within 5 minutes. In Greece, they would tip it over a whole hour. I think Australians, if they're going to go out and eat now or have a coffee, you might start seeing more of this lifestyle where things become a lot slower in mannerism and behavior. And hopefully it can deregulate that dopamine hit Aussies were continually getting from doing all these great things in one day, and really kind of ground them a bit more.
To touch on that, like I've always remembered how, like, because I've been to Greece twice now, the Greek islands, and one thing I specifically remember is like how what seems slow to us, like the services at cafes and stuff. So you go in there with your Sydney mindset, like, oh, okay, just get in, wait, we'll go do other things. But they're not like that. Like they sort of take their time to come and serve you. They have a chat. You're kind of thinking, oh, come on, like you're going to take my order, because you're stuck in that sort of Sydney mindset that we've come from. And it takes a while whilst traveling to sort of lose that. That's why going for a longer trip, you can kind of lose that Sydney mentality. But I did find that they would sort of take a long time to bring the food out. They're very laid back about it. And you'd notice the sort of local people just sort of sitting around for a long time. but yeah, we're sort of stuck in that mindset of just wanting to get in, get out, do other things. So yeah,
Things
I
are
think
going to
you're
be
right.
things are going to take a lot longer now, kind of like what you just
Yeah.
explained. And that's
Yeah.
not just in a cafe restaurant. I think that's even logistics, transport, courier. Already people
Well, I mean,
that I
it's,
know that have ordered stuff in the mail have taken days for them to get. What would take 1 or
I
2
think
days have
it's
taken a
like
week.
time sort of slowed down a little bit, I think, as a result of all that's happened. So I think people have had a chance to catch up to reality and like catch up to what's going on around them, rather than just being focused on like this. They started to open up their perception to what's here, you know. So I think that's a huge thing.
I think the biggest thing is, and a lot of people who will watch this on Facebook are going to probably ask me this: what is my opinion on the whole thing? Because we are coming to the close. It's been almost an hour. I want to summarize a bit more, and we'll definitely do another one, another podcast coming up. There's so much more we have to discuss.
A lot of topics we could go
but this
over.
has been a really good one because I feel like we've actually gone to a nitty gritty of how the pandemic life has changed over the last 4 months, and that's something that a lot of Australians probably relate to. Even if we're all living completely different lives, we're all kind of in this together. But if people wanted to ask me about my opinion on the pandemic as a whole, look, I think it's what you said at the beginning too. Whether regardless of whether it was planned, whether it was inadvertent, how it all happened, I think that's beside the point now. What's happened now is that we have to start making changes within our mindset, within our mental state, within our pursuit towards life that existed pre-pandemic, right? And what that means is, you know, I'm very much a long-term planning type of person. Well, or at least to a degree, right? I have goals that I set out to achieve, and you know, that's part of the same goals that help you do things like finish uni, you know, finish your studies, all that type of thing, right? And even bodybuilding, you know, there are long-term goals you need for bodybuilding too, especially if you're competing. But I feel like now, because of how life has changed so much day to day, Dom, and that the news is, you know, something's always happening every day. I feel like you can't plan for the future too much because of the unpredictability of the current situation. So, you know, even certain business ideas that people had that may have been great ideas a month ago or 2 months ago may not work anymore, you know, because of what this coronavirus and its impact has done to regulate industries, to regulate people's movement. What essentially has happened is there's been a slowdown of the consumer market as well. And in order to really, you know, thrive, there needs to be that consumer market continually being active. And when you lock down different parts of it, you're really left with a question of, maybe what I wanted to invest in, I need to invest in something different, whether that means your time, your energy, your business ideas. People are now more than ever having to reevaluate. And that's the most important message people will have to take from it, is to reevaluate and not worry about, you know, the long-term plans may be inefficient when you don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic, basically.
Well, I guess their plans have to be pandemic proof anyway. So like if it's a business idea, it's got to be something that can survive the pandemic. Like people aren't going to go out and, you know, start these lavish businesses that, you know, would not be deemed essential. So I think a lot of what's happened is people are going to formulate ideas for businesses and work based off what would be considered essential and what people need. So like I've already spoken to a few people who've come up with ideas of how to succeed in this time. You know, even like how gyms closed down, like a lot of people moved to like online training, and like then everyone was doing that. You know, it was like a saturated market at the time. Everyone was like an online coach and, you know, park PTs and stuff like that. So I think it's got to be an idea that can flourish in a time like the lockdown as well, and not even just business related. Like I think just any kind of plan, you know, like you're not going to go plan a holiday in a year's time because we don't know where we're going to be in a year's time.
Exactly, so that's where I'm getting at. Exactly.
We're going to have to be more like likely to change plans. Like
adapt. We're going to be very adaptive. Yeah. And definitely. That's the thing. For example, I'm not saying don't plan at all. I'm saying be smart and realistic in your plans, more so in the short term now than long term at this present
And
point in time,
live in the present time as well.
and
Live
be
in the
a bit more
now.
present.
Yeah.
For example, like a majority of the stuff I teach on is self-development through travel. Now we can't even travel anymore, so it's kind of there's no reason for me as a person to talk too much about the self-development through travel if people aren't planning to travel or can't travel. There still is the self-development aspect that I can talk about, but you know, I get the practicality of being able to travel is not there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're solely focusing on people who travel, which there was a big market, a lot of people traveling, you can't you know, you can't really teach people techniques about traveling if there are no travelers. It's simple. So
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
but that's fine, because you know we still these podcasts, what we can discuss about, that's all universal. It doesn't matter whether you're in your home, whether you're traveling, where you are, you can always have access. So we are moving to a more online platform with how things work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, now that we've kind of overviewed everything, what are some kind of takeaways or final statements you want to make regarding today's topics and what we've discussed?
Look, I think we went over most of the things that we wanted to discuss. I mean, look, we can speculate on like the deeper things, like, and reasons that are behind a lot of this stuff. But as you said, like, some of that's probably not important to a lot of people. Like, it's interesting to talk about. And to be honest, I'd probably still rather know what's happening in the background than just sort of be a sheep that sort of listens to everything thrown at you in the news and believe all the fear and the hype. But at the same time, like, not everyone wants to know that stuff. Not everyone believes in it anyway. And does it really help our situation? Probably not. Like you said, we just need to sort of come up with ways that we can get through this ourselves. So look, like, I'm still interested to always keep up to date with what people are saying is happening behind the scenes, like things that get talked about that aren't happening in the news, the mainstream news. But at the end of the day, I think, look, we just need to figure out ways to sort of get through this as best we can. And like the message that I think we finished on the last time, you know, people need to sort of see this as not an opportunity to just sort of be selfish and get away from everyone else. Like, it should be a chance to
be unified,
reevaluate relationships and, you know,
unified,
things and friendships and things like that. Exactly. Like, I think more than ever, people should be united, you know, because we're all going through the same thing together.
I think one thing is I've been very introverted in this period of time. I don't really outwardly speak as much. And I think the main reason is because I've wanted to collect a lot of thoughts for myself, you know, because it is a lot to take in, especially if you are, you know, have a lot of plans, have a lot of ambition behind you and what you want to do. So, you know, I feel like if you were set out to get a lot done, the reevaluation period and process is a lot longer, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you hadn't had much plan to begin with, there isn't too much to go over. So I feel like those overextensions you've made in your life, whether they were committed to or you were planning to, those are the things that really take time to be able to digest and find out a solution of how you can develop better alternatives for your purpose.
Yeah. I think as well, something I've been thinking about lately is like trying not to get too caught up in global events and global politics at the moment, because like I found myself getting like stressed out by things that are happening in the US and like the political stuff over there and the riots and stuff. And like, although yes, it's good to stay up to date on what's happening, like, I don't think we should adopt the same practices here. Like, I don't think we should be concerned that we're definitely going to go down the same way as the US right now, because at the end of the day,
we're a totally different country. Yeah, we're a totally different country.
The levels of control that you see in places like China, you know, that could eventually go to the US based on things that are happening at the moment. But that's not to say that that's going to come here. You know, it might not be a whole global operation, you know, like maybe some of those things are just going to happen in some countries. Maybe we'll continue to operate how we operate, with a few of the changes that we've discussed. So I don't think all hope's lost for us in Australia. Anyway, I think I'd be a lot more worried if we were living in the US. We'd be having a very different conversation than I think if we were living somewhere
100%.
like
The
that.
conversation anywhere is going to be different. There's so much going on in the world in each and every different country, and that's something that we could probably discuss for our next podcast. But it's been awesome having you on the show again. I believe is a golden gem for a lot of Australians. I hope you guys all enjoy this podcast. We will be back, System 333, on air with Dom, and hope you guys all enjoy some of what will be released within the next month. Thanks.